What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
And yes, it's another episode of Notes from an Artist. I'm your host, Tom Semioli, and my co-host is...
Mr. David C. Gross.
Now, is it fair that
the one listener, for coming back to listen to the show again?
Now, let's not confuse our audience member. I said I am the host. Actually, I am the co-host. We are both equal co-hosts. So there is no... we're a socialist. We're a socialist radio show. David, part two of our interview with Aidan Levy. The book is called Saxophone Colossus: The Life and Music of Sonny Rollins. This is part two of our two-part interview. This book is out now on Hachette Books. It came out in December of 2022. It is a 784 exhaustive review of the life and times of Sonny Rollins. Fascinating stuff, David.
Oh, it's excellent. It's excellent. And one of the things I would suggest, not only listening to the music at the end of this show, but cite the particular songs when you're reading the book, and it really brings new meaning to all of that. It's a great read. It's a great read with listen. And most importantly, if you folks didn't hear last week's episode, Tom, tell them what they've won.
Tell them what they've won. They've won the right to listen to our podcast. But if you don't catch our show live on www.signalsradio.com every Monday night at 8 p.m. on the planet Earth and galaxies thereabout, you can log on to our podcast and become a member of our podcast, which is available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and wherever podcasts are potted. If you want to follow all the goings on of Notes from an Artist, well, heck, go to notesfromanartist.com. You can see us on YouTube. We have a YouTube page, probably entitled Notes from an Artist. And you can follow us on Facebook. That's everybody's favorite platform. Even Mr. Zuckerberg follows us on Facebook. And we are on Facebook as Notes from an Artist. Without further fondue, let's get to our guest, Aidan Levy.
I got in touch with a guy who had this... I found out that he had a letter from Sonny in 1961 during his bridge sabbatical, right before he came down from the Williamsburg Bridge. Right. And I thought, well, what is this going to be? And the story behind it was that this guy was like a college sophomore, and he wrote Sonny Rollins a letter and just sent it off into the void because Sonny had vanished from the scene and nobody really knew where he was.
Right, before the internet where you could...
Exactly. So somehow he got a hold of this address and he just sent it off into the void, not expecting a response. And the idea was to have Sonny provide his thoughts on the jazz scene and the role of jazz in our society for research for his term paper.
Okay.
And Sonny wrote back this like 7-page handwritten response that the guys, of course, saved all these years. But I mean, that's Sonny Rollins for you, that a total stranger, a college kid, and Sonny puts all this time into this response, thinking about what is the role of jazz in our society. And of course, with no sense that, about 60 years later, a lot of that letter would appear in a book.
Wow. Well, we note, right, when you talk about Freedom Suite, which is really the first civil rights album of the hard bop era, and that he would go to colleges to play, and some people would be in tune with his music, but not necessarily his politics.
That's right. So when Sonny wrote the Freedom Suite, it was in part a response to the fact that he had so much trouble getting an apartment in New York in the late 50s, even though he had become an icon of the music already.
He was, sure.
And just a lifetime of injustices. So he felt it was time for there to be a response through the music. Now, the musicians had already been a part of the civil rights struggle and always had, but during the hard bop era, nobody had explicitly made the statement on an album.
Right.
So Sonny did that, and he wrote the Freedom Suite, which is a through composed piece. It's more than 15 minutes long, and it also incorporates improvisation. Right. He recorded it with Max Roach and Oscar Pettiford, the bassist, and he'd also worked with them on Thelonious Monk's Brilliant Corners. And this is another album that Sonny made in the pianoless trio setting. But Freedom Suite made this political statement, and not just through the music, also through the liner notes. Sonny wrote the liner notes to this piece. And it's a succinct statement that encapsulates everything he stands for in the music, of the role of the artist in the struggle for social justice and the cruel irony of American culture being so indebted to Black culture, but rewarding the Black community with injustice. That's kind of paraphrasing it here, but look that up. It's really just a beautiful statement. Yeah. Now, after
the record gets reissued with a different
the record gets
and the liner notes are wiped off.
The liner notes are wiped off,
right.
But I like to think that Sonny kind of got the last laugh there, because the cover art for the re-release, Shadow Waltz, which was also done on Riverside,
right? You mentioned
has this portrait shot by a photographer named Joe Alper, where I think Sonny bears a striking resemblance to Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass, yes, yeah. Fascinating. What was it like? Take us for our audience. What was it like making a living as a jazz musician in the 1950s? When we of course, this is the famous where Sonny takes his step backs and takes a sabbatical. But how could he possibly afford to do that? What was Lucille the primary source of his, I guess, financial bedrock of the family?
Yes, absolutely. So in the early 50s, there wasn't much money to be had. It wasn't so radically different from how it is now financially.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that sometimes we imagine that in the golden age of jazz, or in the hard bop era, that maybe there was like money floating around somewhere, but that's not exactly the case.
Right.
I mean, maybe there were more
money,
gigs here and there.
It just wasn't for the musicians.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Certainly rents were cheaper and things, and artists, but artists still had to have patrons. I mean, still,
Yeah. Of course. So Monk was supported by Nika, the jazz baroness.
Right.
And, they did start to be able to make a living, and sometimes a good living as musicians. I mean, if Thelonious Monk, toward the end of his career, became, the genius Thelonious Monk that was revered across the world. But they had to really toil in the salt mines for a long time. And that was Sonny's experience, just living out of suitcases, doing one-nighters up and down this circuit that went from New York up through like Toronto. And, so how did he take that sabbatical in 1959? Yeah, I mean, he had the support of his wife, Lucille.
Sure.
She had a job as an administrative assistant at NYU.
Right.
And she was able to support him. He also still had some royalties from the music, but they lived very frugally during that period. Prior to that, he was actually doing well before he took that sabbatical. In the early 50s, it was tougher, but by the time he took that sabbatical, he was really earning a lot of money for his appearances. So the decision to step away wasn't like screw this, like nobody appreciates me here. Like he was getting accolades at that time.
Yeah, it was at the height of his popularity.
At festivals. He was exactly.
And as you mentioned, he felt a bit embarrassed.
Yes.
And it was a brave move on his part. I thought, I want to improve, and the only way for me to improve is to step away. I mean, for God's sakes, that's just an incredible confidence.
Oh yeah,
the confidence. Yeah,
yeah. Really, a lot of confidence, but also at the same time, he's always been his own worst critic.
Yeah.
So he didn't think that he was living up to the hype. He just didn't think so.
yeah.
And I think the experience of being up there on the Williamsburg Bridge, just blowing out into the expanse, was something that he still cherishes because it gave him the opportunity to really work on himself. And when he was up there, he wasn't just working on the music. He was doing calisthenics.
Yes, right.
He was doing
Physical.
chin-ups on the bridge. He got involved with different spiritual figures. He started looking into Rosicrucianism. He had this collection of inspirational quotes that he would transcribe by hand and keep in like a briefcase in one of the rooms where he also used to practice. It would have things by like John Donne, the metaphysical poet. It was,
As a matter of fact, I ended up picking up Mansions of the Soul. I wanted to figure out, all right, what is Aidan talking about here? What's Sonny thinking? Really, some interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is some interesting stuff. It's pretty out there. Sonny kind of wasn't sure how he felt about it at the end of the day after he came down from the bridge and started investigating like Eastern religion. He felt that, he'd seen advertisements for the Rosicrucians in comic books, and anything you see advertised in a comic book, how serious could it be?
Right.
But there was a lot that he took out of Rosicrucianism, I think, and he wanted to borrow from the best of all religious traditions and spiritual traditions. So yeah, he took another sabbatical in 1968 to go to India. He'd had that in his mind for a while to go and look into that. So he spent about 5 months in an ashram studying with this Swami out there. The ashram was run by a Swami named Chinmayananda, and the ashram is still there. It's called Chinmaya Mission. But when Sonny arrived, Chinmayananda was not there. There was this fellow who was managing the ashram named Parthasarathi. And Parthasarathi is also a lifelong student of Vedanta, and he's still alive. So I was able to interview him for the book. And he has a school that he's running in India called Vedanta Academy. And I think he's about 95 or 96 now. But Parthasarathi took Sonny to see Bismillah Khan perform while he was in India. And this was an influence on Sonny. He also has Sonny has a song called Powai, and that's the location of the ashram. You can only hear that. It's kind of like a Sonny Rollins deep cut that you can hear on this album that was only released in Japan, I believe, called Sonny Rollins in Japan from 1973. But yeah, that time in India was hugely important to him, and he's still studying Vedanta.
Okay. And then of course the 60s had to be an even tougher time for jazz musicians because it's the rockier, and
right, exactly.
Even though so much, it was a tremendous era artistically in jazz. It really must have bottomed out because you had rock clubs, and up until the time Bill Graham started booking jazz acts with rock bands, but that didn't happen until really the end of the 60s and into the 70s.
Right.
Yeah, there was this question in the critical establishment and in the music industry of, well, can jazz survive this, and how will it look? And they started to embrace legacy acts more.
Sure.
So I think this was tough on new music that was not in the rock paradigm. Sure. And I think that this contributed to Sonny's disillusionment with the record industry starting in the mid to late 60s, and ultimately led him to step away from it again and take that trip to India. But you brought up Bill Graham, and one of the kind of interesting moments in Sonny's career is when he participated in this group called the Milestone Jazz Stars.
Okay.
And the idea was to put together a jazz supergroup that in no way was doing fusion, and organize a tour that would go to different venues that mostly did rock concerts. And Bill Graham was involved with this, and it was a hit. They released an album based on that afterwards, but I mean, they were selling out these concert halls. This was in the late 70s with Ron Carter, McCoy Tyner, and the drummer Al Foster.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, that was kind of an answer to this commercial question of is there still a market for jazz? And of course there always was, but it's not the same size, but it's there.
It is, and it is. And I was exposed to jazz. I mean, I came up of age in the 70s, so I was exposed to Sonny Rollins. One of the reasons why was he had an electric bassist, Bobby Cranshaw, and I could never figure out, wow, he's an old jazz guy. He was an old jazz guy in the 70s, and that he would opt for an electric bass player, which was pretty bold. I thought, or was it, David, you thought it was a matter of economics?
Yeah, I thought to have an upright traveling with you would be an expensive thing. And was I right or was I wrong?
I don't think it was an economic decision, and many people were disappointed to see Sonny playing with an upright bassist. Of course, the bassist was Bob Cranshaw, who also
who plays upright.
He plays upright too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Cranshaw had some kind of injury at some point, and he couldn't really do upright anymore.
Okay.
So he switched to electric, and Sonny wanted to use Bob Cranshaw. I mean, they had this 50-year relationship that, I mean, Cranshaw was really the rock in the band.
Yes.
And if you wanted to play upright, if you wanted to play electric, then, that would just be what it would be.
But that's what appealed to me as a young person, because now you could actually hear the walking bass lines. They weren't buried in the mix. I mean, now we have remastered CDs, so we could hear everything. And then I saw a video of Bobby Cranshaw with Sonny towards the end of Bobby's life, and he was playing an extended range. He was playing a 5-string electric. So yes, so for a young musician myself in the 70s, I saw Sonny with Bob Cranshaw. I think it was at the Calderon Concert Hall. And yes, wow, he's got an electric bass player. Okay, so we can do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think many people thought that it was a response to commercial pressures.
Okay.
That, Sonny wants to play with a backbeat now, and he wants like a funk bassist with him. But it did allow him that expanded range.
Sure.
But I mean, I think really it was just that Cranshaw was playing electric. And I mean, it's not like Cranshaw was the only electric bassist that Sonny ever performed with.
Right.
But, that's kind of how it started. Yeah.
And interesting that
we were saying something about rock music, and it's interesting. We're interviewing Richard Collota next week. He just did the Holy Ghost Albert Ayler book, which I suggest you read. It's fascinating. And in the beginning of the book, he says it's interesting how many rock guitar players were really in love with Albert Ayler. We'll get more into that, with that interview. But I, for me, and so when Bitches Brew first came out, I was listening to a lot of electric music, but it gave me, and a lot of musicians, a lot of people, they went backwards from there.
Right.
To the kind of blues, to the sketches of Spain and so what. So I was working at this record store right by Carnegie Hall called The Record Hunter. And the manager was moving to Mexico. and he had this stack of records. So the very first Sonny Rollins record I heard was Our Man in Jazz. And he also had East Broadway Rundown. So my first immersion in Sonny was pianoless bands. And
Right.
I obviously went back from that, The Bridge, Way Out West. Those were like my four biggies. And it's interesting because, obviously the name of the book is Saxophone Colossus, which is the album that came out in 1956. And when you put the record on for the first time, it sounds like it's pianoless at the beginning. He always had that non-harmonic sort of, as you're saying, changes kind of thing. And what was interesting to me about in really studying your book, the Coleman Hawkins and the Sonny Rollins, they were much more changes oriented in terms of arpeggios and such, which really is the way bass players should think. I've always thought that bass players, a C major scale is really C, E, G, B, D. It's all in thirds.
Right.
Because that's how you articulate what you're doing. So in its own way, Sonny was really trailblazing something that became the norm.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And just thinking about Sonny versus Train, Sonny was quoted as saying that he thought that students of the music might do better to follow Coltrane because you could distill what he was doing to certain exercises or formulas. Not to say that it could be reduced to that. It can't be. But that because Sonny was not as vertical of a player, you might say, that he was maybe more of a horizontal player, more lyrical, that it might be harder to try to play like Sonny, to figure out different licks, let's say, that you might be able to apply to your own improvisation. So, yeah, I mean, this is something that Sonny heard in Lester Young, who was a very lyrical player. And Sonny kind of synthesized that with what he heard in Coleman Hawkins and made his own style out of all of that. But yeah, I mean, you still hear arpeggios delineating chords, but what Sonny became known for was thematic improvisation. And this is a concept that Gunther Schuller writes about in an essay called Sonny Rollins and the Challenge of Thematic Improvisation that was published in 1958. And it's based on Blues 7 from Saxophone Colossus. And the idea there is that Sonny is not just arpeggiating the blues, and the melody is improvised as well, but that he's developing motifs across his extended solo, and that it becomes this lyrical melody and then series of kind of counter melodies on the blues. So, yeah, I mean, he always had that style. I mean, I love what you were saying, that when you listen back, that you start to hear these traces of what he was doing later, that you would hear some of Our Man in Jazz on the work from the 50s, because I think that seed was already there. But yeah, I mean, he was always a melodic player. He always wanted to learn the lyrics to the standards that he played. He became known for interpreting the Great American Songbook, and he felt it was important to learn the lyrics. If you listen to this outtake from Way Out West that's on one of the recent reissues, you hear him talking about that and singing part of I'm an Old Cowhand.
I definitely wanted to bring that up with you because I don't remember where the interview was, but someone asked Lester Young, how come you play the way you do? And he goes, I listen to the lyrics. And then when, in the chapter on Way Out West, it became perfectly clear. That's definitely the thing there.
Yeah, absolutely. He got a lot of that from Lester Young, or Charlie Parker's another one who would learn the lyrics. Charlie Parker loved All the Things You Are, but he referred to it as YATAG, like an acronym, YATAG, which was a reference to one of the lyrics in that song, You Are the Angel Glow. So, yeah, I mean, they had this sense that they were interpreting not just the melody, but also the lyrics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Really, again, the book is an important thing for most anyone to read, saxophonist, drummer, or our listener. Right, Tom?
Our listener, dare we say. Interesting to learn that Sonny was uncomfortable in the recording studio because he was such a perfectionist. And you say that Sonny's read the drafts of the book, but he hasn't read the whole book yet, or probably would be difficult to read a book about yourself this deep. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult. And I think reading the book would be almost like listening to playback for Sonny, which he once said was like Abu Ghraib. Yeah, he also, another quote was that playing in a studio it's like cyber sex. But yeah, no, he has the book. He also got an early draft of the book that I sent him in this thick binder, the thickest binder that I could find.
Right.
And I know that he's read part of it because he was able to make some corrections, but the way that we did that was that I just talked through the entire book, everything that happens in it, over a series of conversations. So he made additions, or if he had any corrections, he would tell me about that. And a lot of that made it into the book. Okay. So, yeah. I doubt that he'll read the whole thing cover to cover. I mean, that might be kind of like, the Albert Brooks movie, Defending Your Life.
Yes, probably. Excellent analogy. Well, what do you hope readers come away with when they read this book? I know the Lou book was a little bit controversial. I saw some pretty nasty things written on Amazon. I enjoyed the book. People don't like to have their heroes. There's the myth, separating the myth from the fact. And that's what journalism is supposed to do. Okay, we don't see very much of it anymore, but that's what journalism is supposed to do. And you present the facts and let the people decide for themselves. That's what journalism is supposed to be. What do you think people are going to come away with? What do you want them to come away with from this book?
Well, I hope that they see how hard Sonny worked throughout his life, that he was somebody who always was striving to improve, that he's still striving to improve, that he's always learning. I want them to get a sense of this great music that he made, and how hard he worked at it. So, the book starts with the rhythm and it ends with the idea of learning. Those are kind of the first and last words of this book. And, it's kind of a simple concept to bring it down to, but it all comes back to that. Just practice, and then keep coming back and try to get it right the next time.
Yeah. And then, of course, accolades.
Now, we know that Sonny has retired at this point. How is he feeling?
I think that, the way he talks about it, oftentimes he's feeling better than ever. That after he couldn't play anymore, it was hard on him, and he was depressed for a while because he'd spent almost his entire life playing the saxophone, It had become like, a third arm almost. It had become a part of him. And to have to give that up was like losing a part of yourself. I mean, I think it's got to be kind of like the ache of a phantom limb.
Sure.
But eventually he realized that he had the opportunity to make that music. He did what he did, and he said what he said, and that chapter was behind him. He went deeper and deeper into his spiritual beliefs, and that's what he's doing now. So when he said he's feeling better than ever, I think that's because of this spiritual journey that he's been on. And at this point, he's dedicated himself to the golden rule. So that he's starting a nonprofit foundation to promote the idea of living by the golden rule.
Right.
And, that's something that I see him continuing to do. And when he talks about the great musicians that he performed with, like Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, he says that they live by that was really something that was important to them, and it's something that's important to him. So how's he doing? It seems like he's doing well to me.
That's great. That's great. It's funny you say that about the golden rule, because when I don't know how long ago it was, but I said if we all followed the golden rule, there'd be no 10 commandments.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Aidan, thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to talk about the Lou book as well. I know that
we'll have you back on for that if you'd like.
Yes, and 7 years. Yeah. That's a real accomplishment to have to keep at that and to have this amazing book out after all that hard work.
Yeah, thank you. It was kind of a biblical journey, 7 years.
And dare I ask you, what is your next project, or is it too early to tell?
Too early to tell. Yeah.
Well, think about Louis Jordan. I'd love to read that.
All right. I'll think about that one. I'll think about it.
Yeah. All right, Aidan. Well, thanks for taking your time. Sorry we started a half hour late. I live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and there's just no moving up here. It's between the city bike lanes and all the construction that's going on up here, it's just.
Oh, I understand.
Where in New York are you?
I'm not in New York.
Actually. Oh, you're not in New York?
No, I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Wow. Can you see trees and sky there?
Yeah, I'm looking at trees and sky right now, actually. So we moved here a couple of years ago.
Okay.
After more than a dozen years in New York, but I still work in New York.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm up in Connecticut. We have more llamas than people here. I like it very much.
We're in Connecticut.
I'm up in Litchfield County, Woodbury, Connecticut.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm from West Hartford, Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
Good place.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Aidan, be well. We'll shoot you an email when this is going to broadcast. I think we've got 2 more episodes of Mark Myers, who just wrote another fabulous book, Anatomy of a Song. Mark, he's a fun. And then we'll hope to sell some Sonny Rollins books. Okay.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for having me.
All right, and be well. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Take
Bye.
care. Another great interview. Hey, folks, we are just on fire. 3 things I want to say before we close out this show. We've got another 6 interviews coming up with authors. Yes, Tom and I actually read the books. It's an incredible thing. It's called reading. And what we do is we open something that's about 8 by 10, sometimes big books, and we look at it and there's this black stuff all over these pages.
What's that?
And it's words. And we actually read those words.
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart, and I want respect.
Then we take notes, and then we come up with ideas for shows. So we've got a bunch of authors coming on. Author.
So, yes, another great interview. Aidan Levy, of course. The book is Sonny Rollins, Saxophone Colossus. And we will have Aidan back to talk about his other book, Dirty Boulevard, The Life and Music of Lou Reed. But let's give folks a little insight into our Sonny Rollins playlist.
Well, we're going to be playing music.
All right, let's not get too deep into it, Dave.
I don't want to give it all away. There's some great songs on this, including a tune that Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane play on, a tune called Tenor Madness.
Wow. Okay, another great show. Okay, take it away, Sonny Rollins.